So I shot this video earlier. It ended up being like half an hour long. But I figured I'd break it up into like 3 parts or something like that, or at least try to shorten it. But we're gonna do a very, very, very beginner project for blacksmithing, okay? We're making these very simple, small, decorative hooks. You can make a coat rack out of them, you can make a hat rack out of them, you can make a key rack out of them, use them for hanging cast iron pans on the wall, you name it. Very, very simple. It involves a lot of basic blacksmithing processes. It involves forging a taper off of a bar, forging a scroll, creating a shoulder, bending steel into predictable shapes. It involves a lot of simple processes like that, and it doesn't require a lot of tooling. I see a lot of guys on YouTube nowadays, and I'm a little late to the game. There's a lot of guys on YouTube that do videos, but the majority of what I see is either really aggressive techniques that people try to tell beginners to use, but the aggressive forging techniques for stretching out steel and for shaping it require really, really accurate hammer strikes. And if you're starting out, you don't have that. I remember when I was starting out, I didn't have a background in any kind of work that required swinging a hammer, so swinging a hammer was kind of foreign to me, and I had to learn how to do it properly. Likewise, you see guys that use big, heavy, bulky, like 4, 5, 6 pound hammers. You don't need that. The hammer I'll be using today is a 2-pound cross-peen hammer. It's very cheap. I got it for like 10 bucks at an antique dealer, and it doesn't have to be a several $100 custom hand forged forging hammer. This is just a simple blacksmithing hammer from several decades ago that somebody got rid of, and now I'm using it. So aside from that, to make this, you need your hammer, you need a flat work surface for an anvil. Again, a lot of guys will say you don't need the biggest anvil, you can make do with something small, but then they proceed to use like a 400-pound antique, once-in-a-lifetime anvil to forge on, and leads people to believe that really to be a good blacksmith, you got to take out a loan and buy the biggest anvil available, and it's not the case. This is 70 pounds. It's cast. It's not even a forged anvil. It's cast. It's 70 pounds, but for 90% of the work that I do, small projects like this, or small knife blades, or whatever the kind of thing that people want to make, this will do you just fine, and this is what I'm going to use today. A pair of tongs. You can make do with pliers, but if you're going to invest money in something right off the bat, I would suggest investing in a good pair of tongs. These will be 40 or 50 bucks maybe, but there's really no substitute for a good pair of tongs. Aside from that, a chisel like this. This is a hot cut chisel that I think reforged out of some other kind of chisel, but those are the only tools that you need. You need a flat surface with 90-degree sides to hammer, to resist the blow of the hammer, to forge the steel. You need a hammer. This is not a big hammer. This is, again, a 2-pound hammer. A claw hammer would work if you absolutely had to have it, or if it was the only thing you had. Chisel and a pair of tongs. And we're forging this out of some 3/8 round bar. This started out life as I don't know, some kind of bolt, maybe to hold together fencing or something, I don't know. I got a whole bunch of it for free, and I cut it down, and this is what I'm using today. So we're gonna get the steel hot and start out forging a point and then a taper, and we're gonna kind of do that in the same heat. If it takes you more than one heat, that's fine. Take as many heats as you want, but instead of doing a very aggressive or using a very aggressive forging method involving the corners of the anvil and the corners of the hammer and landing perfect, exact, accurate hammer blows, we're just going to focus on the angle of the workpiece in relation to the anvil, the angle of the hammer in relation to the workpiece, because that is going to dictate the angle of the point that we put on the bar, okay? And we're just going to work on swinging the hammer accurately and with power. And what I mean by that is, a lot of guys that use heavier hammers starting out tend to choke it and strangle it this way because they want to get control over such a big hammer, and it robs the hammer of the amount of energy that you're transferring to the work. Okay, I'm gripping the hammer somewhere between halfway and 2/3 of the way back, and I'm swinging and whipping the head of the hammer as I go, and that's creating a lot of inertia even in this light hammerhead to strike the steel. So we're going to go ahead and do a point real quick, and I'll show you how that's done. Remember, focusing on the angles and turning the piece 90 degrees between each strike. That's going to allow it to spread evenly in both directions. Now we're going to start working those shoulders back to create the point. I could do this in one heat, and I could swing the hammer a lot harder to get it done, but I'm trying to keep everything in the frame of the camera and show you what I'm doing as I go. But that's how you're going to forge a point to begin with. Again, there's more aggressive manners of forging that involve swinging the hammer at a very dramatic angle off the edge of the anvil, or hanging the workpiece off the anvil and trying to hit it squarely with the corner of the hammer on the corner of the edge of the anvil. But we're just focusing on swinging the hammer where we want it to go right now. So now we're gonna work this shoulder back and spread that further lengthwise, and we'll keep it square for now. Remember, the angle of the hammer and the angle of the face of the anvil are what are dictating the angle of the taper that we make. If it starts to get off center and it's not quite square, work one corner over and then bring it back and work it down square again. Now, if I was leaving this a square taper, I would work on sharpening up the corners as I go, but this is going to be a round taper anyway to match the cross section of the bar that we started with. So now, to create that round cross section, I'm actually going to turn it on the corners at the same angle that we've been using and work the corners of the piece down. And that's going to create an octagon, which will then turn into a hexagon, which will then turn into round. And that'll all happen in about one heat. From here, I'm just rolling it under the hammer, keeping the hammer up and down in the same area of the anvil and rolling the piece underneath it to create that smooth finish. And that's a round taper to a pretty slim point right there. In the next video, we're going to form a scroll, and I'll explain that in a minute, or in the next video, I should say, and form the curve at the end of the hook. But for now, that's a very simple round taper from a square taper. Round tapers and square tapers are good for finishing the ends of a bar. They're good for making tools. They're good just for all kinds of stuff. You're going to use them all the time. And all you need is a flat surface to hammer on, some material for your stock, a fire hot enough to heat it, and a lightweight hammer. So there you go. Like and subscribe, and you'll see more.